G'day everyone, I am the Thorough Tank, and this is a quick reference guide to the lower Karazhan dungeon on Mythic Keystone difficulty. On most affix combos, this is one of the more difficult dungeons in the game, and pretty much the reaction of everybody to getting a key for this place is universally disappointment. Hopefully, this guide will counteract some of that by giving you an overview of all of the bosses, the important trash mechanics that you need to worry about, including stuff that can kill you, and anything else you might need in order to tank this for a group of strangers. One quick note before we start. This video is going to feature a number of different point of views for the footage that I've used, particularly for the opera event, as obviously there are 3 different opera events that you can get on any given different week, and there wouldn't be much point in only showing you one of them. So I have got a few different videos stitched together here to make sure I give you everything you need to know. On with the show. First things first, you'll kill this forlorn spirit that's right in front of you when the key starts, interrupt the soul leech, and use a cooldown if you get the dot that they cast. It's exactly the same as the ones from Upper Karazhan, so you deal with them the same way. Now the trash leading all the way to Opera is all exactly the same. They've got 3 main abilities that you need to worry about. The first, and by far the one you'll be the most familiar with, is their ability called Pennies from Heaven, which is a channeled ability they all do, which puts glowing yellow circles on the ground that deal heavy damage if you're standing in them. You need to make sure you move out of these for as long as they're spawning. Don't get hit, they do a huge amount of damage, and you'll very quickly wipe if your group is getting hit by these. The other 2 abilities are both unavoidable. One is called Throw Coin, which will be targeted randomly at anyone in the group, including you. Does a huge amount of damage, 3 to 5 million depending on the key level that you're running. You can't do anything about it, you just have to make sure your healer is ready for random spikes of damage and use as many AoE stuns as you can to control these mobs. The last ability is called Uppercut. Again, not something you can avoid unless you stun the mobs. It's just a quick cast that the mobs will all do, and they'll target only you as the tank. It's another physical damage ability, so make sure you keep your mitigation up the whole time you're fighting these. Most groups should be able to handle double pulls of these packs. You shouldn't really have too much of a problem pulling multiple groups, as long as you can make sure that the affixes don't prevent it. Things like bolstering obviously will rule this out, but otherwise you can pretty safely do multiple pulls. Now here we come to the Opera event. There are 3 different bosses that the Opera event can involve. It changes per week, it is fixed, so every keystone you do in a given week will be the same boss. So I'm going to go through each of them one by one and cover them off so that you're covered no matter which week you end up with. Coming up first is the Beauty and the Beast event. This is by far the most difficult of the 3 options you get, and also the most misunderstood. The best kill order is as follows. You'll always kill the broom first, followed by the flaming kobold, followed by the cauldron, followed by the dinner pot. The kobold is the only one of these that can be tanked at the start, so pick him up straight away and then help DPS the broom as it kites around following your group members. The most important ability for you to watch out for while you're tanking the kobold is called Heatwave. It's a channeled fire AoE cast. If he gets it off, he'll start channeling massive fire damage to the whole group, so make sure you save your interrupt for that and get it every time it's cast. The next ability you want to watch out for is the Leftovers cast. It's a big green circle cast by the soup pot. You just want to make sure you move out of it. It can be interrupted, but you don't want to waste your interrupt on it when the kobold is still alive, because Heatwave is far more dangerous. If one of your group members happens to interrupt it, great. If not, it's pretty easy to dodge. The other cast you have to worry about is called Soup Spray. This leaves a frost damage debuff on a random member of the group, which will deal a reasonable amount of damage, but the important thing about this debuff is that it's the only way to clear up the fire left behind by the kobold. Depending on how quickly your group can kill the kobold, you might find that your group needs to use this debuff to clear out the fire. Once you've killed all of the others, Coggleston, the pot, will become attackable. Every 30 seconds he summons a pair of ads to fight with him. These don't really do too much, just tank them as best you can. If there's a bunch of them at once, use some defensive abilities. He also puts some debuff on you called Dent Armor, which increases your damage taken by 50% for a short time. If there's a bunch of forks on you, this can do a lot of extra damage to you, but it's not really too much of a problem. Lastly, you'll want to interrupt Dinner Bell. If it gets cast successfully, it'll buff him and everything around him with double the haste for a short period of time. If this lines up with Dent Armor, you can take some real damage, so make sure that gets interrupted. That's everything for the Beautiful Beast event. Like I said, it's one of the more difficult encounters, mostly because there's so much going on for your group to worry about, but if you keep your focus, you should be fine. The second possible opera event is called Wicket, and you'll be fighting 2 casters. Just keep them stacked up for cleave as they share health. This one is by far the easiest and shouldn't give any groups much trouble as long as they know how to deal with the main mechanic. The primary mechanic in the dungeon is called Magic Magnificent. A large channeled ability will start being cast. In order to avoid it, you need to step on one of the purple void zones to be launched into the air. If you don't step on it, you'll get one shot. Make sure you only step on these for the Magic Magnificence cast because they're a single use and will despawn once they've been used. Step out of the Arcane rune whenever it gets created underneath you. Lastly, small adds will periodically join the fight. They don't really do much, just deal minor nature damage to the party at random. They can be stunned and don't have much health, so you should be able to kill them pretty quickly. That's all there is to the Wicket encounter. Like I said, one of the easiest ones, not really too much to worry about. Just make sure you use the Defy Gravity patches successfully and your group won't have a problem. Last up we have Westfall's Story. I'd put this one in the middle in terms of difficulty, but it's still pretty easy. The gap between it and Beautiful Beast is still pretty substantial. The only real dangerous ability in the phase is the Burning Leg Sweep, which is a big fire circle. If you're standing in it when it goes off, it'll stun you for 4 seconds and leave a magic dot on you. After every Burning Leg Sweep, he'll dash to each player in the group once and leave behind a fire patch at their location, so everyone should stand reasonably close together so that they don't get too far apart. However, this is only really important on high tyrannical keys, as on any other key, you'll finish him off long before you run out of space. The adds for the Murloc, unlike the adds for Tony, actually are reasonably dangerous. You want to make sure you interrupt their bubble blasts as much as possible, as it's a knockback with a frost damage component. They're vulnerable to all interrupts and all stuns as well. When the Thunder Ritual circles appear around everybody, make sure you spread out so that yours doesn't overlap on anybody else. And lastly, when the waves appear from both sides, move through them one at a time. So try to stand relatively close to the middle, move through one, and then quickly move through the other. If you leave it too late, you can get yourself into a bad situation. Once you bring the Murloc down to 15% health, the other mob will join back in again. Make sure all your DPS switches to him straight away, as you want to kill him before the fire patches become unmanageable, and the other mob's abilities don't have any sort of soft enrage component to them. It's still not really that difficult, just make sure you move out of the fire kick and you should be fine. Once Opera's down, head through the door. For this next trash, there's really only one thing you need to watch out for, and that's the glowing circles on the ground. There's 2 different kinds. One is called Poetry Slam, and it's a golden circle, which is an AoE stun, which can be silenced. And then there's Final Curtain, which can't be stopped, and is an orange circle, which just deals a large amount of fire damage in a circle. Make sure you step out of both of these. The easiest way to deal with it is just to steadily backtrack while you're fighting these each time they cast, and you can easily keep everyone out of it. Now the trash at the bottom of this ramp in the next area gives a lot of groups a lot of problems. So I'm going to show you a good way to do it. It may look a little bit scary, but it actually works out a lot better in most groups. First, let's take a quick look at what we're dealing with. At the front and at the back, you've got 2 packs of casters, and to the left and the right, you've got 2 packs of melee mobs. Don't worry about the melee mobs, all they do is a little bit of tank damage. You just need to make sure you've got cooldowns up when you're fighting them. The casters are what is dangerous. They channel an ability called Firelands Portal. When it goes off, it does a big chunk of fire damage and spawns an ad that you have to deal with. Now the only way to deal with these consistently is AoE silences and AoE stuns. Your group isn't going to have enough of these to do the pulls one at a time, so the safest way to deal with it is actually to pull the entire room at once. It looks scary, but as long as you use your own tank defensive cooldowns and everybody coordinates their stuns, it works just fine. Make sure that you take a quick look at your group composition before you do this pull and let them know. If your group doesn't have many AoE silences and stuns, you probably can't do this, but nearly every group will be able to. There are 2 reasons why this is the safest way to do it. First, AoE damage is AoE damage. It doesn't matter whether you're fighting 3 mobs or 20, they'll all die at the same time when you're using cleave abilities. Secondly, there are more than enough casters in the individual packs to wipe you if your group doesn't know how to use their AoE interrupts effectively. And if they do know how to use them effectively, then you can just do the pull all at once. It's a win-win scenario. You'll be familiar with the flashlight ability on the Skeletal Ushers. This doesn't really do too much damage to you as the tank, but be careful that you don't turn around too soon. When you're turning your back to the mobs, they're hitting you in the back, you're not dodging, you're not blocking, you're not parrying, you're not doing anything. So make sure you just turn around at the very last possible minute and you will be completely fine. How many of these mobs you can pull at a time is going to depend on the key level and the affixes. If it's a high level fortified key, you might only be able to pull 2 or 3 of them before you start risking the group getting one shot by flashlight. If it's a low level tyrannical key, you could probably pull 5 or 6 without really too much problem. So use your judgment and try to learn from experience. If you pull too many and the group wipes, file that away as a mental note to pull less next time. Pull these packs of phantom guests in the next area. You do want to be careful pulling these because there is one caster in each of these packs which will hang back and cast if you let it. You might need to run backwards and line of sight these pulls. It's a safe way to bring them back if you can't rely on your group to interrupt them. There are 2 other kinds of mobs in the area. The Spectral Valet casts Demoralizing Shout, which needs to be interrupted. It'll make your group deal less damage if it goes off. And the Undying Servants will cast Shackles of Servitude, which reduces damage dealt and movement speed. A quick rewind. Do not, under any circumstances, fight these packs here. They do a mind control and a dangerous AoE heal, which get cast so often that it's nearly impossible to prevent them from doing it. Do not pull these packs, they will almost always lead to a wipe. This hallway is one of the more dangerous areas in the dungeon, and it definitely can scare some people who don't know how the mobs work. The first and simplest mob is the Phantom Guardsman. Just make sure you move out of their shield smash. It'll stun and do an enormous amount of damage to you. If you do get clipped by one of them, it's really easy to get clipped by the follow-ups, and you can find yourself permanently stunned for a very long period of time. The casters in these packs are extremely dangerous up ahead. There are 3 things you need to watch out for. First, the reformed Maidens will cast Flirt above 50% health, then below 50% health they'll cast Heartbreaker on anyone with the Flirt debuff, and it'll do an enormous amount of damage. You need to try to interrupt their Flirt casts, or if Flirt gets off, make sure you stun them to interrupt Heartbreaker. The other 2 mobs, the Wholesome Hostess and the Virtuous Lady, have 2 very similar abilities. Below 50% health, the Virtuous Lady will cast Shadowbolt Volley, and the Wholesome Hostess will cast Banshee Wail. They're both dangerous AoE abilities that need to be interrupted, so make sure you're looking out for those. The last type of mob to watch out for is the Spectral Sentry. They're not very dangerous, but they have a ranged attack and they're not casters, so the only way to move them is to line of sight them. So if you need to pull them back for whatever reason, make sure you run around a corner and they'll run to you. I usually like to split this hallway into 2 pulls, grabbing everything in the first half and then taking everything in the second half through into Maiden's room in order to group it up. However, if you want to be a bit careful, you can chop that first pull in half and split the hallway into 3 pulls. Doing it any more carefully than that is a bit unnecessary and you should have no problems. Maiden is a super easy fight for tanks. There really is almost nothing you have to worry about. Interrupt the Holy Shock as often as you can. You don't have enough interrupts to get them all, so you will need your group's help for them, but hopefully they know to look for it. If you take the debuff, you'll end up with a permanent bonus increased damage to Holy Shock taken from the boss, so you don't want to let this get on you because it'll make the rest of the fight that much more difficult. Make sure the boss is relatively close to the holy patches for mass repentance, and don't forget to grab yourself a stack of the debuff so that you can break out. It's a good idea to be ready to use your interrupt on the Holy Wrath, just on the off chance that your DPS aren't paying attention, but everyone pretty much knows that basic mechanic of the fight. You shouldn't really need to worry about using your own interrupts for it. The range on Holy Bolt chaining between group members is 6 yards, so make sure that if you have more than 1 melee DPS, you help them to form a triangle around the boss so that nobody gets chain casted on. After Maiden is down, you're going to head over to Morose next. Just head back over the way you came and head over to the balcony where you'll get ready to jump down. Make sure you jump down to the right hand side against the wall so that you can safely pull just the pack of guests without worrying about accidentally grabbing the Arcane Warden. Most of the time grabbing the Warden is no big deal, but on weeks like bolstering for example, you're going to really cause some problems if you grab the Warden because the phantom guests will all die first and you'll end up with massive stacks of bolstering on the Warden. Move out of the purple swirls the Warden leaves on the ground, and when everybody in the party gets the circles around them for the Arcane Blast, make sure that you don't stand in it, and if you've got the circle yourself, make sure you move away from your group. The Arcane Wardens are the only real dangerous trash mob in this room, so run around and clear everything as you go. There is a patrolling skeletal waiter around the room. Make sure that you're careful about grabbing him as soon as you see him coming. He doesn't really do anything to you, puts a tank damage debuff on you, but nothing in this room actually hits you that hard, so it doesn't really affect anything. Morose is another difficult fight, and it's another fight with a little bit of an element of randomness from week to week. There will be 4 dinner guests with Morose from a possible pool of 6. Here are the 6 possible dinner guests that you can find in this encounter. They have a mix of interruptible and dodgeable abilities, and you'll deal with them in a unique way depending on which combo is present when you run the dungeon. I like to split these mobs into 2 categories based on their abilities. In the dodgeable category, you've got Baron Rafe, Lord Crispin, and Robin Darris. And in the interruptible category, you've got Lady Kira, Baroness, and Lady Catriona. In general, the safest strategy is to make sure you are dealing with 2 mobs at a time, 1 from each of these categories. That way, your group only has to worry about dodging 1 ability and only has to worry about interrupting 1 ability. And because you are the tank and you're incredibly smart and you're paying attention by learning from this video, you can guarantee that the interruptible ability will be taken care of, leaving your group to only worry about dodging stuff, which is a much easier task. If you are feeling more confident in your group's ability to control the mobs, you can fight 3 of these at a time. Generally speaking, the one mob you are always going to want to CC and kill last is Crispin Ference. He does an incredibly dangerous ability called Willbreaker, which will be targeted at a random member of the group and do a huge holy damage AoE, which can really hurt. So, by leaving him until last and fighting just him and Morose, you guarantee that all of your group's attention is 100% focused on dodging that ability. Once the majority of the adds are dead, you're pretty much through the worst of the fight, and the only thing you really need to look out for after that is the Coat Check ability. It's a magical debuff that reduces your armor. It can be dispelled by your healer, but he doesn't hit that hard, so even if they don't, it's not the end of the world. This fight is largely on your group members to make sure that they dodge all of the various mechanics from the adds, to make sure that they help you in interrupting the dangerous abilities, and make sure that their DPS is up to scratch so that you kill this boss before his garrotes start to overwhelm you. If they can manage all of that, you're not going to have a problem. Once you've cleared out Morose, head out of the door towards the ballroom and start making your way down towards Acheman. None of the mobs here are any different to anything you face. There's no new mobs to worry about yet, so just pull carefully, make sure you don't grab anything extra unnecessarily, and just make your way through, clearing out all the trash on the way down. The horses in Acheman's trash have 2 abilities. One is called Charge, which will shoot them out in a line away from where they're facing and will deal a large amount of damage to anyone caught in its path. The other is called Trampling Stomp, which is an interruptible ability that does a large amount of damage to everyone in the group. Interrupt this when you can and make sure you move out of the charge. 2 mobs to worry about in these packs through the door here in this section. The Spectral Apprentice will cast Burning Brand on members of your group. It's a fire damage ability that will leave a dot on them after it expires and will overlap to anyone caught in the effect. So make sure your party spreads out. If you get the ability, make sure you spread out as well. And the Spectral Journeymen have a large hammer cleave, so make sure you face them away from the group and try not to get your melee DPS killed. If you're confident in your group's healer or in their AoE stuns, you can pull the 2 groups of these mobs together, but be careful doing this. If you don't trust your group or the healer's not up to scratch, your group can quickly get overwhelmed by raid damage. The last new mob for you to learn in this dungeon is the Spectral Stable Hand. He has a healing touch which you'll try to use on an injured member of his trash pack. When you're fighting him, make sure to interrupt this, as you really don't want to end up having to kill this trash more than once. There are some packs with more than 1 of these, so make sure you use your AoE silencers if necessary so that you can control these guys and not let them get heals off. Acheman is a fight with a lot going on, but I'm going to distill it down to the essences for you and focus on what's important and what can really kill you. If you're on voice communications with your healer, it's a good idea to shout out if you're the one who gets the ghost debuff, because sometimes it can be a little bit difficult for them to spot who's got it. Once Acheman jumps off his horse, get ready to pick him up and tank him so he doesn't melee anybody. 3 abilities to watch out for in this phase. The first is Midnight's Charges. It'll pick a direction and charge across the entire length of the room. Make sure that you just move out of it and try to move the boss out of it as well so that your melee DPS aren't tempted to stand in it. Next ability is Mortal Strike. It's a frontal physical damage cone that will reduce your health by half. Make sure you face this away from your group. If you're a class with a high mobility ability like Heroic Leap or Infernal Strike, you can actually dodge out of this ability and avoid getting the debuff. This is useful for what comes up next. The next ability up on the chopping block is Shared Suffering. It's a huge shadow damage AoE around the boss, which shares all of its damage around however many people are in the radius. My preferred way of dealing with this is to pop all of my cooldowns and solo it. This is a reasonably good way to go about it until you get to very high tyrannical keys, where you'll probably need a DPS with an immunity to jump in the ability with you as well to help reduce the damage a little bit. The last mechanic you'll need to deal with is called Spectral Charge. Waves of blue horses will appear randomly around the boss, and you'll need to make sure to walk around them or between the gaps to make sure that you don't get hit. They won't one-shot you, but it is pretty heavy damage anyway, and you'll still want to try to dodge if you can. After the Spectral Charge, once you've DPS'd him back down to 50% health, he'll jump off the horse again, and you'll deal with the second phase again. This goes the same way as before: dodge the Mortal Strike and deal with the Shared Suffering. Once you finish him off to 0 while he's off his horse, you'll enter the last phase of the fight. In this phase, you'll be fighting Midnight by herself. All she does is a periodic large AoE damage to your group, and she's gained a lot of damage once you enter this phase, so she does melee pretty hard as well. So make sure you keep up your cooldowns, use any cooldowns that are left over, and you'll be done. One quick little note: if you get to the end and find you haven't quite got enough trash percentage done, you can head up the stairs at the back here and pull some of the mobs up the top here. They work out to be a little bit of extra percentage, and it'll often be just what you need to get the job done. And that brings us to the end of Lower Karazhan. This dungeon is probably one of the most complicated ones in the game, so this is why this video has turned out to be so much longer than all of the others. I hope this information has given you the confidence to go out and tank it for a group of strangers, and give you the idea that you know what you're doing. As always, I'm the Thorough Tank. Leave a comment below if you think I've missed anything or you'd like to say hello, and I'll see you all next time.